Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a little art doll making video. It's the new little art doll that I made. I did a poll over on my Patreon to vote on the next art doll that people wanted me to make. So the Red Panda was the winner. And if you already haven't seen my sculpting the face video, I'll try and remember to link it down below, but I never remember. And I go through the process of sculpting the head for this one. The head in this particular art doll has a movable jaw, so it's a little bit more work to get everything working. Basically, I sculpt the lower jaw first and I bake that. Then I sculpt the top jaw over the top of it and add the little joint that I use for making the jaw movable. And then I can sort of finish off the sculpting and go from there. So after that's done, I then sculpt the feet. So I wasn't going to sculpt the feet for this one originally. I was going to do a like a fabric sort of sculpt, but I didn't really like the stability of what that was offering, because the head is quite big. It is quite a large doll. So I opted to sculpt some feet for the Red Panda, and I pre-made some little claws because they have long little claws. So you can see that on the right there. I've made the little claws out of a translucent Sculpey, and then I've baked them. They're all the same size, and I've made sure they're all the same, roughly the same shape as well. So what I'm doing now is just sculpting all four of the feet. So the back feet are like a different shape to the front feet, so they're a bit longer. So I always have reference images up on my computer to make sure I'm getting all of the proportions right and just all of the detailing right as well. And because these are going to be covered in faux fur, I don't need to be too particular about all of the detailing, like sculpting fur or anything, because I'm going to be covering it with faux fur anyway. So it's just more about getting sort of the form right to begin with, and then you can sort of add the rest of the detailing once you put the faux fur on. And these are going to be covered in black faux fur anyway. So the materials that I'm using for this is, I decided to go for an armature inside. So I'm using an aluminium foil sort of ball as a base armature for each foot. The front ones are obviously going to be smaller, and they need to be quite thin as well, because you want to get all that detailing into the sculpture. So I've made them quite thin. And I just added this in just to, one, use less Sculpey, and two, just to make them a bit lighter as well. But you don't have to for something thin like this. For something thick, you definitely have to add an armature inside, because you don't want the Sculpey too thick, because it won't bake in the middle and it'll sort of stay soft. So yeah, definitely recommend using an armature when you're doing Sculpey things as well. So the Sculpey that I'm using is Sculpey Original. It's the white one. It's a little bit softer than Super Sculpey, that's the beige coloured one, and Sculpey Firm, which is the grey coloured one. But it's really down to preference on what you like sculpting with. I like sculpting with softer things, so I opt for the Sculpey Original. And when I have finished and I'm happy with the way the feet are looking, I'm going to be adding in those claws, and I will glue these later, but I'm sort of just preliminary adding them in, because if you just sort of poke them in like this, chances are they'll just slip out. So I'm just adding these in because they're already baked. I can sort of just push them in to a space that I like and just fiddle around with it a little bit to make sure everything's looking proportionate, and then I can bake the whole thing. Moving on, while that's baking, I can start working on some of the ears. So the ears are something that I'm sort of started to do on a couple of dolls. I did it on my previous tiger dolls, and I am obviously going to do it on the Red Panda doll. So it just means that they're gently posable. And I use a wire frame for this one. It's an aluminium wire frame. It's a little thin one because I don't want it too thick, because it's a little bit hard to pose. And they're sort of gently posable. They're not overly posable, but you can get them into a couple of little different positions to get a different sort of face type and structure. And basically what I'm doing, the ears are a little bit different on a Red Panda. So they kind of have different coloured tones on it. So the middle front of the ear is white, and it has like a little bit of colour on the inside, and then the back is a kind of a combination of brown and the white. So the white sort of goes over the top of the ear and a little bit onto the back. So what I'm doing is I've got a rough shape of the ears that I want to do out of the wire armature, and I did it for both sides of the ear, obviously, and then I'm going to be adding it in between both of the faux fur pieces. So I'm adding a generous bit of glue to the white piece, which is the front, and then I'm going to be adding that wire armature in between and making sure that I have a little bit of that wire sticking out so I can insert it into the head when I'm ready. And this is really just a really rough shape of the ear, of what I want it to do. And when I'm happy with the position of where I want that wire sitting, I go ahead and add all the rest of the pieces from the back. So I'm just adding a little bit of white to begin with, just to do that little white strip that's on the back, and then I'm going to be adding the brown faux fur to the back and making sure that the wire is covered, and then I'll be doing a little bit of work on this once it's all dry to shape the ear to something that I want. So I always like to do something bigger so I can shape it to a shape that I want, and it always turns out too big for the head anyway, so I just wanted to give myself a little bit of leeway to make sure I can trim things accordingly. So once the glue's been put on and I'm sort of putting all the pieces together, I want to make sure everything's stuck together. So just pressing it down a little bit, making sure not to spread the glue around too much and make it come out the front. And then once I'm happy and it's dried a little bit, I can start sort of blending in those seam lines. And the way I do this is just a really thin piece of glue around that seam, and then slowly just working in that that faux fur into the seam so it becomes sort of seamless. And this technique works really well. You just have to get the ratio of the glue that you put down correct so there's not too much leakage. And if you've got it correct, then usually the fur can stick to itself, and then it hides that seam line. When you trim it a little bit, it hides the seam line really well. Moving on to the armature, so I'm using a ball and socket armature. This is my, how big is it? 1/4 scale armature, I think it is. So it's the middle one. I didn't opt to go for the big one because I thought it would be too excessive. So this is the middle-sized armature that I have. I do have rolls of it in my shop, and I have a few pliers left, the tools to separate them left, and they're sort of quickly going out of stock, so yes, keep an eye on that. But I do have a few rolls of this in my shop if anyone's interested in these ball and socket armatures. So I've done basic shape of the armature that's going to be inside, and it's a really basic shape of how the skeleton is, I guess. And what I'm doing is wrapping some polyfill over the top of it using pipe cleaners as like a catch, and then just needle felting a body onto it. So it takes a little bit of time to do the needle felting, but I find polyfill works really well, and you don't have to be too particular about it because you're going to be covering it with the faux fur anyway. But you can achieve certain muscle tones with needle felting. It's take a bit longer, but I think it's worth it in the end. So what I'm doing is sort of mapping out the faux fur of the torso piece to begin with. The Red Panda is a little bit different to sew together because the colours are sort of all over the place. So I went for a darker underbelly for this particular Red Panda, but they come in a lot of different shades. But I kind of liked that the darker underbelly against the the orange. I think it looks really cool. So I basically sewed on the torso piece to begin with in the orange, and then I'm going over it in that black. And then I'm going to be blending the legs. The legs are also going to be black, but I'm going to be blending in the black to the orange with some browns. And it's really just to your imagination and how you want your Red Panda to look, really, with the colors that you want. So you can do it. They come in so many different colors, so or different shades, I should say, not colors. So some of them have really light underbellies, like a brown, but I opted for the black. So once I've done all the torso pieces, I can start moving on to the legs. And it's the same sort of concept where I just get a larger bit of faux fur and sort of roughly shape out the shape that I'm wanting. And this kind of lets you conform it to the needle felting that you've did a little bit better. And I just think it's more realistic once the doll's finished. Because you can sew it against that form that you've done with the needle felting. So once I've done that and everything's sewn up and glued together, I use a tacky fabric glue to glue the fabric to the polymer clay pieces. I then add some faux fur to the head and give it a trim to how I like, and then add any little details that I need to add. So I always sort of re-add detailing to the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So just using some paint. I use water-based acrylic paint, nothing special, and then adding little markings to your creature, whatever you're making. So I'm using some brown fabric paint to add some markings, and also add the blending into the orange pieces that blend into the black, and not too dramatic. So the last little thing I'm going to be doing is some more little details of some whiskers. I have a whisker tutorial in my shop if you're interested in how I do these whiskers and what materials I use, so check that out. I'll try and remember to link it down below, but I never remember. So that's, pretty much the whole process of making this little one. He is sold, so he's not available anymore, but I do have a few more dolls in my shop at creaturesindat.com, so check that out, as long as other things. You can also check me out on Patreon as well. Link is down the bottom. And also on my Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, creaturesindat.com. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!